Hello, folks. Welcome to another episode of SHU Outdoors. My name is Mick. I'm your host. And on today's episode, we're going to do a deep dive into the New York State prison system and the violence that happens to inmates at the hands of correctional officers. I did 14 years in the New York State prison system. So I have a lot of firsthand knowledge of the goings on in that system. And there has been a long history of corruption in the New York State Department of Corrections. And there's also been a long history of prison guards committing extreme acts of violence on the prisoner population. I've seen many incidences of it. I've had the misfortune of being in Attica, which is like one of the worst prisons probably in the country, but definitely right up the top of the list in New York State. I've been in Sing Sing. I've been in Elmira. I've been in Comstock. I've been around in a number, 8 or 10 different mediums in New York State. Obviously, Rikers Island. So, a lot of people are familiar with Rikers Island, but that's the city jail. And when you leave Rikers Island, you get a prison sentence, or any county jail in New York State for that matter, you're going to go into the New York State prison system. And, I've viewed the footage of what happened in the Robert Brooks case. I've been following that case for a couple of years now, since it happened. And unfortunately, I can report to you, based on my personal knowledge, that that's the norm in New York State prisons. Those correctional officers didn't do that because that was their first incident. It's just like a criminal. It's very rare that a criminal, a guy who's been a law-abiding citizen his whole life, decides to go rob a bank. It doesn't start that way. It starts with putting a pack of bubble gum in your pocket at the local, convenience store or the supermarket, and then you steal a couple of steaks, and then you burglarize a car, and it leads up to a bank robbery because you allow yourself to get sucked into that lifestyle. And in New York State, every prison in New York State, and I know it's still the same, even though obviously now they wear body cams and there's cameras everywhere. They've been doing it so long. When Robert Brooks happened, they were just, hey, this is just business as usual. A prisoner gets out of line. We don't care if he has mental health problems. We don't care what's going on. We'll just take him over to medical and beat the hell out of him. You got to figure a lot of those school teachers in New York State, they have relationships with the C.O.s. The same way with the nurses. So they look the other way. It never gets reported. It never becomes an issue. And they do really operate with a gang mentality, the C.O.s there. And they all cover each other's backside. It just so happened in the Robert Brooks case, one of them wasn't down with the bullshit that the other C.O.s were doing, and that body cam footage was released. Now, I researched this before I came on the air, and several New York correctional officers involved in the fatal beating of Robert Brooks at Marcy Correctional Facility have been convicted or pleaded guilty, with outcomes included guilty verdicts for murder, manslaughter, and guilty pleas for manslaughter and evidence tampering, leading to significant prison sentences for some, while others were acquitted in earlier trials, and more plea deals continue to be processed as of early 2026. Key development and offenders convicted: David Kingsley, found guilty of second-degree murder and first-degree manslaughter, received 25 years to life in prison. Guilty pleas and a sentence awaiting resolution. Anthony Verona and Nicholas and alone plead guilty to first-degree manslaughter, sentenced to 22 years each. Michael Marshall and David Walters pled guilty to second-degree manslaughter, received shorter sentences. Marshall, a 3 to 9 years sentence, and Walters, 2 1/3 to 7 years. Nicholas Gentle plead guilty to attempting to tamper with physical evidence, cleaning blood. Christopher Walrath resigned and pled guilty to manslaughter in a related case or earlier in this one, sentenced to 15 years. You see, there's a whole little goon squad in every New York State jail who deals with people that staff has a problem with. They'll come and get you, take you over to the hole, and beat the hell out of you. Or do it in medical, where you have all the alleged medical professionals who know exactly what's going on, turn their head, let it happen, and then help them make sure that all traces of the crime that they just committed go unpunished. This has been happening in New York State prisons for decades and decades and decades. It's not a new thing. Again, you don't just start robbing banks. It's something you build up to. And it's the same thing with these correctional officers in New York State and every other state around the country, because they've been doing it for so long and getting away with it and having no consequences. They feel like, hey, what's the big deal? That's what we do. You know what I mean? Some guy pisses us off. We'll go get him, put him in handcuffs, take him over to the medical or to the hole, and just beat the living hell out of him. Who's going to do anything about it? Who can do anything about it? It just so happened that they had the wrong governor and the wrong attorney general. Letitia James, give you a shout out, girl. Keep your good work up. Damn all the player haters, all right? You know, she did exactly what she was supposed to do. She prosecuted those pig devils and sent their ass to jail, all right? And hopefully they're in there getting the business every day, because that wasn't the first time they did that to a prisoner. Robert Brooks happened to be the case that exposed them. But they've been doing that to prisoners for decades. And because of technology now, all it takes is one nurse or one CO that ain't with the business. And it just so happened, obviously, a nurse in that facility wasn't with what they were doing and leaked the evidence. They did that so brazenly, they felt that it would never come back to haunt them. If you look at the video footage, and I'm not going to play it here because, I mean, everyone's aware of it. But this is just a deeper dive into that system. When I was in Attica, right, if you did something the police didn't like, what they would do, they wouldn't write you a ticket. Pop an old spitless chew here. But they wouldn't write you a ticket. What they would do is tell you to take 2 days off, 5 days off, or 6 days off. And what that means is don't come out of your cell for 3 days, 5 days, a week. Don't go to chow. Don't go to the mess hall. Don't go to rec. Don't go to programs. Don't do nothing. If you come out of that cell, when you come back from wherever you're going, they're going to come and get you, take you to the hole, and beat the living shit out of you. Okay? When I was there, you used to have the goon squad, and they'd roll around with black gloves on with leaded knuckle pads with the lead on them, knockout gloves. And it became such a thing, they passed a new directive where they issued all the C.O.s blue gloves, and it was a part of their uniform. They couldn't wear any altered glove. They could only wear the glove that the state provided for them, because it was well known the goon squad wore the black gloves. They called them the Black Glove Crew, and they would have leaded knuckles, so they could really, really hurt you bad without doing any damage to their knuckles. That way, it would never, you'd never be proven. And the nursing staff was with it. They were with the business. The warden, they call them superintendents in New York. The captains, they were all with the business because they all come up through the ranks. And that was just the way things was done. Now, obviously, they got the body cams in there, and they got cameras everywhere. When I was in Attica, the state would send people around to put cameras in the hallways and stuff. And within 2 weeks to a month, they'd be broke, hanging from the thing. The cops would break them and hang them from the thing. There was never any blowback from the superintendent or the warden. They could have stopped it a long time ago. They allowed it to go on and go on and go on. This is not a new thing. And hopefully it has been carteled greatly. But with my personal experience with that system, I doubt it. I think it's probably still going on to varying degrees because there's all kind of torture tactics they could use. And one of them is just literally beating the hell out of you while you got handcuffs on. You know, they had no problem doing that. That was the norm. It just so happened that it got exposed with the Robert Brooks case. And, I mean, it was horrible that man lost his life in such a degree. But if you look at the photo, they're all just standing around, holding him in place while the other officer kicks him, beats him, tortures him while he's got handcuffs on. Now, it was well known when I was in the system this was the norm. You get out of line, you do something they don't like, they might not beat you up right then and there on the spot. They might even let you think you got away with it. 3 or 4 hours later, or next morning, when the goon squad got there and found out what was going on, they'd come and get you, put handcuffs on you like they were taking you to the hole. This happens, you know, in prison. People go to the hole. They get you over to the hole with the handcuffs on. 3 or 4 or 5 of them would literally beat the hell out of you, let you sit in a hole for 3 or 4 or 5 months or 2 months, however long it took you to heal up, spit in your food, do all this type of stuff, then transfer you to another facility. And meanwhile, your family's calling up there trying to find out what's going on. Well, he broke a rule. He's in the hole. He has no access to the phone right now, or spin some BS story. And obviously the correctional officer union would go out of their way to cover up for them in any way whatsoever. It has always flabbergasted me why we as a nation, as a society, would depend on the law enforcement, some internal investigation of the correctional officers or a law enforcement union to investigate themselves and then come up with the fact, oh, there was no wrongdoing here. It was a reasonable amount of force that they used. It was totally fine. Nothing to see here, folks. And people accept that until it's your son who gets beat to death while he's got handcuffs on. Or until it's your mom who gets shot in the face. Then all of a sudden it's a big deal to you. No, it should have been a big deal when it was happening to anybody. Not just when it happens to somebody you love and care about. I come to the conclusion a long time ago, and I know a lot of people may not think this is cool. You don't fight fire with fire. You fight fire with water. That's the reason why when the fire department comes to put a fire out, they come with a water hose, and they connect it to a water the truck where they can get water, or the fire plug, and they spray water on it. That's what we need to do as a society, okay? This is the norm in the New York State prison. And it may have slowed down a little bit now, only because the cops don't know if they can trust one another, and there's body cams everywhere, and there's cameras everywhere, and it only takes one person who ain't with the business to record the shit and put it out for the world to see. But this has been going on. Countless prisoners have lost their lives at the hands of dirty, corrupt New York State prison guards. And the Correctional Officers Union said he tried to attack one of our officers. They just restrained him, and unfortunately, he already had an assisted medical condition, and the guy lost his life. And people accept that and move on with their life. Hey, what's the big deal? It didn't happen to me or my son or my father or my mother. So, hey, who cares? Well, you know what I mean? You get what you get, and you're only going to have whatever you're able to fight for and prove. And you can't depend on the courts neither. Oftentimes, the courts are corrupt too. because you got to see things in its proper light. You say, well, a judge is somebody who judges the law and produces a result based on what the law is. But really and truly, that's a totally skewed point of view, because most judges, not all, but 75-80% of federal judges and state judges, they were prosecutors before they got appointed to the bench. So that's like you play for the New York Yankees. You love the New York Yankees. Man, you wear all kind of New York Yankee apparel, and then one day, you become a referee. And everybody who plays against the New York Yankees, you call everything they do, but you let the New York Yankees get away with doing things that no other ref would let them get away with doing. All right? The same thing happens in the courts. Don't never fool yourself into thinking judges are independent, fair arbitrators of the facts and the law. They see what they want to see and overlook what isn't convenient. And if you don't know how to keep the case alive and to stay in the fight, they got no problem dismissing your case and letting you rot in prison, or letting you go to prison for X amount of years where you're never heard from again. So the whole system is skewed, all right? And if you don't know the truth, you can't acknowledge the truth. And that's what this channel is all about, bringing the truth to the people. I say a prayer for Robert Brooks. I can only imagine what it was like for him being handcuffed and sworn officers of the law, because a correctional officer is still technically an officer of the law. Yeah, they're the lowest hanging fruit on the officer of the law family, but these people have uniforms on. They're there to represent the state, care, custody, and control. Once you got the guy in handcuffs, there's only so much he can do at that point. Talk crap. You know what I mean? You can hold him. You don't have to beat him to death. That's exactly what they did. So imagine the terror. This young man, Robert Brooks, already suffering from mental health disorders, already in need of help, but instead of the psychology staff offering help, the medical staff offering help, they turn to the goon squad to do what they do best. And don't fool yourself for 1 minute. The warden, the superintendent knew what was going on. The captain knew what was going on. The sergeant knew what was going on. The medical staff knew what was going on. Psychology knew what was going on. And every one of them was with the business. All it took was one. Thank God one wasn't with the business, who filmed that shit and released it to the public, and all hell broke loose. I say a prayer again for Robert Brooks and his family. And I hope every one of those C.O.s burns in hell. And I hope every day they do in prison is horrible and terrible. And I hope they suffer every day, just like they made Robert Brooks suffer. And trust me, that wasn't the first one they did it to. They did it so brazenly. They beat the man while he had handcuffs on. That wasn't the first time they did it. It was just the first time they got busted for it. So just because somebody's a CO or a police officer, all these conservative lames love to pat him on the shoulder. Oh, this guy's great. Nah, yeah, there's a good chance you done committed federal felonies, all kind of felonies while you had that uniform on, and your ass didn't get busted yet. But remember, there's cameras everywhere, and your days are probably numbered. And good for them. I hope all of them burn in the darkest pits of hell. Once somebody's in handcuffs, they're not a danger to you no more. Take them to the hole. Next morning, feed them what they got coming. Treat them like a human being. Treat them the way you'd want your son to be treated. Now, a lot of cops and CO, my son would never be in that situation. You know what I say? Screw you, all right? That's what I say to you, all you punk-ass COs who facilitated that, all you medical staff who facilitated that, all you psychological staff who are overpaid and underworked, who ain't worth the salt that goes in their bread. I hope you all burn in hell, and that's just the way I see it. Now, yeah, you got a few decent COs. They don't go in there to do that kind of stuff, but when they see it, they don't report it. Because they know if them blue line are going to go against them, smut their name, try to fire them, do whatever they can do to kind of hurt and torture them too. We've let our correctional staff and our police officers become a gang of thugs. You got ICE right now roaming around the street with automatic weapons, body armor on, with their face covered. Isn't that very similar to something that happened in like the 1930s and 40s in a country called Germany? I mean, you have to ask yourself, hey, if you're cool with that, you're cool with it. If you ain't cool with it, do what you got to do. But at the end of the day, don't act like it don't exist. Don't act like it ain't happening. Because it is happening, man. And I say another prayer for Robert Brooks. I hope he's rested in peace. And I say that with the utmost respect. No cynicism in my voice whatsoever. I really, truly mean that. What happened to that man was horrible. It shouldn't have happened. But it's been going on so long in New York State, it was the norm. They beat the guy mercilessly while he was in handcuffs. And everybody stood around and didn't do anything to intervene. At least one staff member had the class to record it and release it and put them all on blast. And again, I hope every one of them rot in hell and suffer every day they're in prison. And until next time, to the next episode, stay up. I value all my viewers, and we're going to keep doing the hard-hitting, deep dive. I don't care who I offend or who I rub the wrong way. It is what it is. If ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox News can report on it, I can report on it too. This is SHU Outdoors, where we keep it real, we keep it raw, and we're going to keep on doing it. And if somebody deserves to have a pat on the back, I'm going to be the first one to say, hey, that was a good call. If somebody deserves to be called out, I have no problem calling them out. I don't care. Let the chips fall where they may. So until next time, stay up. Peace.